Alicia Monroe was not born into wealth or privilege. She grew up in a small neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta, Georgia. Her mother was a school teacher, and her father worked at a car repair shop. Life wasn't easy, but her family was. Filled with love, honesty, and a strong belief in hard work. Alicia always had big dreams. Even as a little girl, she would line up her teddy bears and give pretend business presentations, talking as if she was in charge of a company. She was the kind of child who read science books for fun and asked deep questions about the world. In high school, while others were planning parties, Alicia was attending summer programs in robotics and clean energy. She had a passion for protecting the environment and believed that technology could be used to make the world better. Her teachers noticed her potential early and encouraged her to apply for scholarships. Alicia earned a full scholarship to one of the top engineering schools in the country. She was one of the very few black women in her class, and though it was sometimes lonely and difficult, she pushed forward. She stayed focused on her goals and spent long hours in the lab, learning everything she could about battery technology, energy storage, and sustainability. After graduation, she worked for several tech companies. She learned how businesses grow, how products are developed, and how to manage teams. But deep down, Alicia knew she wanted to create something of her own, something meaningful. After saving for years and building the right connections, she launched her own company, EcoCore Innovations. EcoCore started in a small shared office with just 3 employees. They worked day and night to develop a clean, low-cost battery that could store solar and wind energy better than anything else on the market. Most people didn't believe they could do it. Investors turned them down again and again. Some didn't think Alicia had enough experience. Others couldn't understand her vision. And a few, though they didn't say it out loud, simply couldn't see a black woman needing a tech revolution. But Alicia didn't give up. She kept improving the technology, ran successful tests, and slowly began to prove the doubters wrong. After 4 years, EcoCore had built a battery system that was not only powerful but also affordable and environmentally friendly. They filed patents, gained certifications, and finally caught the attention of big energy companies and investors around the world. One of those interested parties was the Hawthorne Group, a multi-billion-dollar industrial family company based in New York. The Hawthornes had been in business for over 100 years. They owned everything from oil pipelines to steel factories. Their name carried weight in every boardroom. The family was known for their wealth, power, and influence. When Alicia received the first message from their investment team, she was cautious but hopeful. A deal with the Hawthornes could give EcoCore the financial strength to build factories, scale their technology, and bring clean energy to places that needed it most. It could also be a huge step for Alicia, personally proof that someone like her could stand beside the giants of the business world as an equal. Talks began quietly. Alicia flew to New York for a series of meetings. The Hawthorne offices were grand high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors. Everything looked expensive, serious, and a bit cold. Alicia was polite, prepared, and professional. She brought her chief engineer and head of finance to support her presentations. At first, the meetings were smooth. The younger Hawthorne executives, especially Andrew and Claire, seemed curious about EcoCore and asked detailed questions. But as the talks continued, Alicia started to feel small shifts in tone. During one meeting, Charles Hawthorne Sr., the founder's grandson, asked her if she had ever run a deal this big before. Another time, one of the family's advisors interrupted Alicia mid-sentence and began explaining her own technology, as if she hadn't understood it herself. Alicia noticed that when her male team member spoke, they nodded and took notes. But when she answered questions, they often looked past her or acted impatient. Still, Alicia chose not to react. She stayed calm and focused, hoping that professionalism would eventually build respect. Weeks turned into months. Lawyers reviewed contracts. Engineers from both companies visited each other's labs. The numbers were impressive. The Hawthorns offered $900 million to acquire a controlling stake in EcoCore, with Alicia staying on as CEO. On paper, it was a dream deal, but behind the scenes, Alicia was growing uneasy. There were moments small, subtle ones that felt like warning signs. A comment here, a dismissive look there. She couldn't say exactly what it was, but something about the partnership didn't feel quite right. Still, she reminded herself of her goals. With this funding, EcoCore could open facilities in Africa and South Asia, hire hundreds of people, and bring clean energy to millions. Her board encouraged her to move forward. "You've built something amazing," they told her. "This is your time." Alicia agreed to attend the Global Green Energy Summit, where the deal would be softly announced. She knew it was a big moment, not just for her company, but also for representation. A black woman leading a near-billion-dollar deal in clean tech was rare, almost unheard of. She picked out her outfit carefully, practiced her speech, and reminded herself that she had earned every bit of this success. She didn't know then that something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would change everything. The conference hall was filled with excitement. The Global Green Energy Summit was one of the biggest events of the year. Leaders from all over the world had gathered to talk about clean energy, climate change, and the future of technology. Alicia stood backstage, holding a copy of her speech. She could hear the voices of hundreds of guests on the other side of the curtain. This was a moment she had worked for her whole life. She took a deep breath and smiled to herself. Just 5 years ago, she was working late nights in a tiny lab, wondering if her ideas would ever matter. And now, she was about to share the stage with some of the world's top business leaders. Her company, EcoCore, had come so far. She felt proud, not just for herself, but for her team, her family, and the young people who might one day follow her path. The announcer's voice rang out. "Please welcome Charles Hawthorne, Executive Chairman of the Hawthorne Group." There was loud applause. Alicia peeked through the curtain and saw Charles walk confidently to the stage. He was tall, with grey hair and a suit that looked more expensive than a car. He had a strong voice, and when he spoke, people listened. Alicia had seen this before. In meetings, how everyone leaned in when he talked. Charles began to speak about the future of energy. He used big words and strong phrases. He talked about change, innovation, and the need for bold ideas. Then, after a few minutes, he smiled and said, "And now, I want to introduce someone very special." Alicia straightened her shoulders. This was her moment. She is the founder of a company doing remarkable work in green battery technology. Charles said, "Thanks to our partnership, she now has the chance to bring her dreams to life. Please welcome the face of tomorrow's energy, Miss Alicia Monroe." At first, Alicia didn't catch it. The words sounded fine. The crowd clapped, and she walked onto the stage. But then she noticed something. A few people looked confused. Some exchanged glances. She turned toward Charles, expecting a handshake or a smile of support. But instead, he said one more thing, half joking, half serious. He laughed and added, "We love supporting promising talent, especially when they're such great examples of today's commitment to inclusion." There was a soft chuckle from the audience, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that made people feel happy. It was awkward. Alicia stood still for a moment, her hands at her sides. Something didn't feel right. She gave her speech just as she practiced. She talked about clean energy, EcoCore's journey, and her hopes for a better world. The crowd clapped politely. But inside, Alicia felt unsettled. She had been introduced not as a leader, but almost like a symbol, like she was there to make the Hawthorns look good. After the event, Alicia tried to brush it off. Maybe she was being too sensitive. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But as she walked through the lobby, she overheard two guests talking near the coffee table. "Wasn't that the woman from EcoCore?" One said. "Yeah," the other replied. "I think she's the CEO. But the way Charles talked, it sounded like they hired her." Alicia didn't say anything. She walked past them with her head held high. But her heart was heavy. Back at the hotel, she met with her team for dinner. Her lead engineer, Marcus, looked at her across the table. "Are you okay?" he asked. Alicia nodded, but her mind was racing. "I'm just thinking," she said quietly. She didn't sleep much that night. She kept replaying the words in her mind. "Thanks to our partnership. Such great examples of inclusion." Was that how people saw her? As a checkbox? As someone who got lucky because of others? She thought about her years of hard work. About all the nights she stayed in the lab while her friends went out. About the investors who turned her down until she proved her technology worked. About the pressure she faced as one of the few women, especially a black woman, leading a company in the clean tech world. She had earned everything. She knew that. And yet, one moment on stage had made it feel like she was just allowed to be there. The next morning, she had a meeting scheduled with the Hawthorns at their private office near the hotel. She arrived on time, wearing a sharp navy blue suit and carrying a folder filled with final contract notes. She walked into the conference room where Charles and two of his sons were already seated. They greeted her politely, but something felt distant. "We'll have our lawyers send over the final terms by tomorrow," Charles said quickly. "Let's aim to close the deal by next week." Alicia sat down. "I'd like to talk about yesterday's event," she said calmly. Charles looked up, surprised. "It went well, didn't it?" "There were parts that concerned me," she said. "I felt that my role and my work were not presented clearly. It sounded like EcoCore was your project." "That's not accurate." Charles leaned back. "Alicia, it was a public event. These things happen. Don't take it personally. You're the face. We're the structure. It's how partnerships work." Alicia felt the words hit her, but she didn't show it. "I understand," she said. "But I need to be seen not just as the face, but as the founder, the leader, and the decision-maker. EcoCore was built from the ground up by my team and me. I want to be sure the world sees that clearly." One of the Hawthorne sons shifted in his chair. "We're offering you the biggest opportunity of your life," he said. "Let's not get distracted by feelings." Alicia nodded slowly, then stood up. "Thank you. I'll be reviewing everything again before we move forward." She walked out of the room feeling a mix of strength and sadness. For months, she had believed this deal would change everything. But now, she wasn't sure if it was the right path. Something inside her had changed. Respect mattered more than money. Truth mattered more than praise. Back at her hotel, she looked out the window at the city below. Cars moved, people rushed, lights flashed. The world kept going. But Alicia paused. She picked up her phone and called a board member. "I need to talk," she said. "Something doesn't feel right. I need to think carefully about this deal." And with that, Alicia began to consider a new decision, one that could risk everything she built, but might protect everything she believed in. Alicia Monroe flew back to Atlanta 2 days later. Her team welcomed her with smiles, flowers, and cheerful voices. But behind her calm expression, her mind was filled with thoughts. She had just returned from one of the biggest energy events. in the world where her company had been introduced as a future industry leader. On the outside, everything looked perfect. Inside, Alicia was carrying a feeling that something was wrong. She went straight to her office, a glass corner room overlooking the city skyline. It was quiet, her favorite place to think. She stood by the window, arms crossed, remembering every word said on stage by Charles Hawthorne. His introduction kept playing in her head, especially the part where he said, "Thanks to our partnership, she now has the chance to bring her dreams to life." That one sentence made it sound like her success was a gift, a favor, like she hadn't worked for it. She thought about how people clapped politely, how some even laughed at the diversity comment. It was strange no one had said anything directly to her afterward. Nobody had pointed out that something was wrong, but she could feel it in the way people looked at her, in their quiet nods, in their surprised smiles. She had become a symbol in someone else's story, instead of being the writer of her own. Later that evening, she met with her executive team. There were 6 people in the room, each of them holding reports and laptops, ready to talk about the next steps for the $900 million deal. They discussed the Hawthorne Group's terms, the expected timeline, and future expansion plans. Alicia listened quietly until one of her board members asked, "So, are you ready to sign next week?" She looked around the room. Everyone was waiting for her answer. "I'm not sure," she said carefully. The room fell silent. Her chief financial officer blinked, surprised. "Not sure?" he repeated. Alicia took a breath. "There were things said during the event in New York that I found troubling. The way the partnership was presented, the way I was introduced, it felt wrong. It felt like they were taking credit for something they haven't built." Marcus, her lead engineer, nodded slowly. "I noticed it too. It didn't sit right with me." Another team member said, "It was a bit uncomfortable, but maybe it was just poor wording. These events can be tricky." Alicia shook her head gently. "It wasn't just one comment. It was a pattern I've noticed since we started talking with them. I've worked hard to stay professional, but I can't ignore what I'm feeling. This deal is more than just money. It's a partnership. If we don't feel respected now, what will things be like after they own part of the company?" One board member leaned forward. "Alicia, this is a $900 million opportunity. If we walk away, we may not get another offer like this again. You sure you want to take that risk?" She didn't answer right away. She looked down at her notes, then back at her team. "I'm not saying no yet," she said. "But I need time to think. I need to make sure this is right, not just for the business, but for our values." The room slowly nodded in agreement. Even though some looked worried, they trusted her leadership. Over the next few days, Alicia spent time reviewing the contract, talking to advisors, and quietly reaching out to other leaders she respected. She spoke to women in tech, founders of startups, and even people who had walked away from major deals before. One woman told her, "Sometimes the cost of peace of mind is higher than the cost of a big check." That sentence stayed with Alicia. Morning, she was sitting in her kitchen, having coffee and reading a news article. The story covered the summit in New York. It included a photo of her and Charles on stage. The headline read, "Hawthorne Group takes lead in diversity with EcoCore deal." Alicia's stomach turned. The article made it sound like the Hawthornes were the heroes of the story. It barely mentioned EcoCore's technology. Instead, it focused on how progressive the deal made the Hawthornes look. There were quotes about inclusion, modern leadership, and fresh faces. But none of the quotes were from her. She put the article down and stood up. At that moment, she knew what she had to do. She called for a special board meeting. Everyone arrived quickly, sensing that something big was about to happen. Made my decision, she said firmly. We are not moving forward with the Hawthorne deal. There was silence again. Some people looked shocked. One of them asked, "Are you absolutely sure?" Alicia nodded. "Yes, I'm sure. This deal would give us money, but we'd lose our voice. I won't let this company become someone else's trophy." She paused and added, "We built EcoCore with honesty, purpose, and care. I won't let us trade our dignity for dollars." Some board members looked uncertain, but no one argued. After a moment, one person began to clap. Then another. Soon the entire room applauded. News of Alicia's decision spread quickly. At first, the business world was confused. Headlines asked, "Why did EcoCore walk away from $900 million? People on social media debated whether it was brave or foolish. Some praised her for standing up for her values. Others said she had made a mistake. But Alicia stayed calm. She released a public statement that read, "EcoCore will grow, but not at the cost of respect. Our mission has always been bigger than business. We believe in clean energy, fairness, and leadership that comes from truth. We thank the Hawthorne Group for their interest, but we have chosen a different path." That statement was shared thousands of times. People from around the world, especially young entrepreneurs and women in business, sent messages of support. Alicia's inbox was flooded with thank you notes, encouragement, and even offers from other investors who admired her courage. Over the next few weeks, something amazing began to happen. A group of ethical investors, many of them led by women, and people of color, reached out to Alicia. They offered funding not because they wanted to control her company, but because they believed in her vision. They wanted to support her, not shape her. Alicia took her time to review each offer carefully. She chose partners who respected her leadership, understood EcoCore's mission, and agreed to terms that kept her company's independence safe. In the end, EcoCore didn't just survive the cancelled deal, it became even stronger. Alicia's decision showed the world that success doesn't have to come at the cost of values. And even though she had turned down $900 million, she had gained something much greater: self-respect, trust, and a future built on her own terms. The morning after Alicia's decision became public, the phones at EcoCore didn't stop ringing. Some were from reporters, some from curious investors, and many from ordinary people who had heard her story. Alicia sat in her office looking at the sunrise through the large window, feeling a mix of peace and nervous energy. It had only been 24 hours since she announced the cancellation of the $900 million deal with the Hawthorne Group. But the world had already taken notice. Headlines appeared everywhere, some praising her decision, some questioning it, and others simply asking, "What happens next?" Inside the EcoCore building, the atmosphere was electric. Employees whispered in hallways, refreshed their emails constantly, and waited to see what their CEO would do next. Alicia knew her team was looking to her for answers and direction. More than anything, they needed to know that her decision had not put their futures in danger. That afternoon, Alicia called an all-hands meeting in the company's main conference room. Every employee squeezed in: engineers, marketers, assistants, and interns. Some sat on chairs, others stood along the walls, holding coffee cups and notebooks. Alicia stood at the front with no microphone. She didn't need one. When she spoke, everyone listened. "I want to thank each of you for believing in EcoCore," she began, her voice steady. "Yesterday I made a choice. It wasn't easy, and I know some of you may be wondering what comes next. I want to be clear. We didn't say no to the money. We said yes to our values." There was quiet applause. She continued, "We have always believed that clean energy can and should come with clean leadership. We deserve partners who see our worth, not just our technology. I promise you this. We will find better partners. Ones who believe in us for the right reasons. The applause grew louder. Faces across the room lit up with pride. In that moment, Alicia knew that she hadn't just protected her company's future, she had inspired the people building it. Later that week, Alicia's story was featured in a national magazine. The article didn't just talk about EcoCore's technology. It talked about courage, leadership, and standing up for what's right. Young entrepreneurs across the country shared the story on social media. The post with Alicia's quote, "We will not trade integrity for capital," was shared over 1 million times. The public support brought new attention to EcoCore. Within days, several investment groups contacted Alicia. Some were large banks. Others were smaller firms led by women, people of color, or organizations focused on environmental goals. These were not just investors. They were potential partners who understood what Alicia had built. She set up virtual meetings with each one. She listened, asked questions, and made it clear that EcoCore would remain independent. She wanted support, not control. She wanted partners, not owners. One meeting stood out. It was with a group called Global Green Women, an international investment collective made up of female leaders in clean energy, science, and business. The group had followed Alicia's story and admired her decision. They didn't want to change EcoCore's leadership. They wanted to help her grow it. During the call, one of the group's founders, a woman named Dr. Lena Patel, said something that stuck with Alicia. "You reminded the world that leadership is not about power. It's about purpose. That's why we want to invest in you, not just your product." Alicia smiled. It was the first time during this process that she truly felt seen. After several weeks of discussions, Alicia and her board selected a new group of partners investors who respected EcoCore's mission, trusted her leadership, and agreed to terms that protected the company's independence. The final amount raised wasn't $900 million. It was smaller, closer to $500 million. But this time, the money came with no strings attached. With the new funding secured, EcoCore began to expand. They opened a new research center in Texas, hired over 100 new employees, and launched clean battery pilot projects in rural towns where access to clean energy had been limited. Alicia also created a mentorship program for young women and underrepresented students in science and engineering. She wanted to make sure the next generation could see themselves in leadership roles. Not someday, but now. At a press event announcing the new partnership, a reporter asked Alicia, "Do you ever regret turning down the $900 million? Alicia didn't hesitate. "Not at all," she said. "We didn't lose anything. We gained clarity. We stayed true to who we are. And that's worth more than any check." The room clapped. But the real applause came from outside the building. People sent letters, emails, and video messages thanking Alicia for showing them that strength and kindness could go hand in hand. Meanwhile, the Hawthorne Group remained quiet. They issued a short press release saying they respected EcoCore's decision. But in business circles, their reputation had taken a small hit. Some people began to question how they treated partners. Others started looking for companies with more ethical leadership. Slowly, the business world began to change. Months later, Alicia was invited to speak at a leadership forum for young professionals. She stood on stage in a bright, simple dress with no flashy graphics behind her. Just her story. She told them about growing up in a working-class family, going to engineering school, and building EcoCore with her own hands. She told them about the night she stood on stage with Charles Hawthorne, and how it felt to be turned into a symbol rather than a leader. She shared how hard it was to walk away from $900 million, but how proud she was that she did. "I'm not here today because I said yes," she told them. "I'm here because I had the strength to say no when it mattered most." The crowd gave her a standing ovation. After her speech, a young woman walked up to her and said, "I want to start a company one day, but I didn't think I could. People like you make me believe I can." Alicia smiled, her eyes warm. "You can," she said, "and you will. Just don't let anyone write your story for you." And with that, Alicia Munro, the CEO who had once been doubted, now stood as a symbol of leadership, not because she chased the biggest deal, but because she chose the right one. Months passed since Alicia Munro made the brave decision to cancel the $900 million deal with the Hawthorne Group. EcoCore Innovations was growing in new and exciting ways. That Alicia knew that true success was about more than just numbers. It was about the values that guided her company and the example she set for others. With the support of her new investors, many of whom were women and people of color, EcoCore began to focus on expanding its reach to communities that needed clean energy the most. Alicia personally traveled to several rural areas where electricity was unreliable or expensive. She met families, small business owners, and local leaders who shared stories of how energy shortages made life harder. For Alicia, these visits were reminders of why she started EcoCore in the first place. One afternoon, Alicia visited a small village in South Carolina. The sun was bright, and children played near solar panels that EcoCore had helped install. A woman named Rosa greeted Alicia warmly. Rosa explained how the new energy source allowed her to keep her small grocery store open after dark. This simple change had increased her income and made her community stronger. Alicia listened carefully and promised to continue working so more places like Rosa's village could benefit. She also invited local young women to join EcoCore's mentorship program, hoping to inspire the next generation of leaders. When Alicia spoke with these girls, she saw the same spark in their eyes that she had felt as a child. Back in the company's headquarters, EcoCore's team worked on improving battery technology to make it even more efficient and affordable. Alicia encouraged collaboration and creativity, believing that the best ideas came from many voices working together. She made sure the workplace was welcoming and inclusive, a place where everyone felt valued. Meanwhile, Alicia's story continued to inspire people far beyond the clean energy world. She was invited to speak at schools, universities, and business conferences. Her message was simple but powerful. Success means nothing if you lose your integrity along the way. One day, Alicia received a letter from a young woman named Maya. Maya was a college student studying engineering, but had struggled to find mentors who looked like her. She wrote about how Alicia's leadership gave her hope and motivation to keep going. Alicia was touched. She wrote back, offering to meet and support Maya's goals. This connection reminded Alicia that leadership was about community. It was about lifting others as you climb. She worked to create scholarships and internship programs at EcoCore, helping young people from underrepresented backgrounds get real-world experience in the tech industry. At the same time, the business world was beginning to change. The story of Alicia's decision to walk away from the Hawthorne deal sparked conversations about respect, equality, and true partnership. More companies started paying attention to how they treated founders and leaders who didn't fit the old mold. Alicia was asked to join boards and advisory groups focused on diversity and ethics in business. She accepted, knowing that her voice could help shape a better future for others. Her leadership was no longer just about EcoCore. It was about creating lasting change. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Alicia sat alone in her office. She looked at photos on her desk, her family, her first small team, and pictures from community visits. She thought about how far she had come. From a girl dreaming in Atlanta to a CEO changing the world. She smiled softly, feeling proud but humble. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Lena Patel, the leader of the Global Green Women Investment Group. Congratulations on the recent partnership wins. EcoCore is making a difference, Alicia. Keep shining. Alicia typed back, "Thank you, Lena. This journey is only beginning." She put down her phone and looked out the window. The city lights twinkled below, but Alicia's thoughts were on the future where leadership was honest, inclusive, and kind. In that moment, Alicia Monroe knew her legacy would not be measured just by money or deals. It would be measured by the lives she touched, the barriers she broke, and the example she set for everyone who dared to dream. And so, Alicia's story continues not as a chapter closed, but as a book still being written, page by page, with courage and heart.